Welcome everybody. My name is Lorna Breckle. I'm the Family and Volunteer Support Manager based at Rampton Hospital. I would like to welcome you to our summer virtual social visitors get together. We have a variety of presentations. Please sit back and enjoy. If you have any questions you want to ask after the presentations that you want to ask someone at the hospital about, please contact us in the Family and Volunteer Support team. The numbers will be at the end. Thank you.
It's fantastic to see so many of you here, actually. I wasn't sure with the sun shining the way that it was, whether you'd all take to your gardens rather than to your screens. So it's absolutely fantastic to see you. We've got some faces from the hospital as well and from the wider trust. I can see a couple of our involvement brilliant people. Morning, Nigel. Morning, Paul. It's good to have you both with us this morning. So my part really is I don't want to take up a great deal of time this morning because we've got a very, very busy agenda and an awful lot to talk about. Obviously a significant purpose for these kind of meetings is to get your feedback and understand your feelings and views on things that are happening. So that's what we want to spend the time doing rather than you all having to listen to me. I suppose as we are approaching summer, we as a hospital we're very much looking forward to a bit more business as usual. We have had a hospital roadmap out of lockdown that has mirrored the government's national roadmap out of lockdown. And we've written it in such a way that it's government statements about what will change in the country, and written that in a way of what that means for Rampton Hospital and what that means for the patients of the hospital. I'm touching every piece of wood around me that I can find, but we've done really, really well. We haven't had to go back any stages. We haven't had any COVID outbreaks for a number of months now, actually. We haven't had any staff or patients who have contracted COVID for a good number of weeks. So we look as though we are en route to be able to fully recover. Obviously, the final date for the government is the 21st of June. And on Monday, we are expecting announcements from Boris Johnson in terms of whether the country will move forward to that final stage. So we will do nothing without the rest of the country doing it. So we're awaiting Monday to find out what he says. But so far, certainly from a hospital perspective, things have significantly improved, and we've been able to move back to patients being able to live more of their usual day in the hospital, being able to go out to activities, access fresh air, meet with each other outside. We've had some events, some charity events that have gone on. We've had lots of fun, actually, with various different activities across the hospital. So that's been fantastic. We're very happy with that. A couple of things just to mention, and these will have been mentioned to you before, one in more detail than the other, but we've always had a bit of an issue where we have daycare services available for the Learning Disability Directorate, the Women's Directorate and the Personality Disorder Directorate, and our Mental Health Directorate have had to use other areas but haven't had their own specified day area. We have found that area. The patients have named that the Phoenix Centre. A significant amount of work has been undertaken to make that fit for purpose, and we're only really a few weeks away now before that opens, and then our mental health patients and mental health services will have their own dedicated day centre area, which is absolutely fantastic. We've recruited to the manager of that day centre, so we're full steam ahead for that to go forward, which will improve the activity levels for that group of our patients. And then for those of you who were here a couple of events ago, we had Megan McNaney with us, who talked us through the transition work for PD services. and a very different way of working in terms of reaching out to areas that patients were going to be going to. We used MS Teams for patients to be able to meet and get to know their new care services and develop those relationships, so that when they did move on out of Rampton, they are much more likely to be settled. We continue that link in with those patients after they've moved, just in that settling down period. That has continued to go really well. And so much so that we had colleagues at a conference yesterday sharing the success of that programme. So I thought, given that we had quite a lot of conversation about that a number of months ago, I just wanted to bring that back and share with you that's going really, really well. I'm conscious of the time. My time slot on the agenda is up to 10 past 10, and I'm 9 minutes past 10. So I don't usually manage to be that perfect with my timing. But again, welcome to you all. Good to see you all. And I hope that we have a really successful morning in terms of sharing initiatives and elements with you and gaining your feedback.
Just to add to Anna's bit, I want to sort of just talk to you a bit about visits, to say that we've now had over 1,100 virtual visits since we started in October, which is absolutely fabulous. So thanks to all the staff that have been involved in facilitating that, and to you as visitors for getting involved in that. Just a couple of things on that. We have now introduced on-site visiting, as Anna's talked about. We'll wait till the roadmap to see how that can be opened up further. If there are no changes to the roadmap, we'll continue. How that's working out is that we tend to have about it's about half and half virtual visits, half on-site social visits at the moment. So it's evening out, and we continue to support both initiatives going forward, as we recognise just how important the virtual visits are for people. So the other thing I wanted to mention is that the booking system is currently, you can do your bookings for Purple visits in app, and we're looking to see if we can get that for social visits as well. So that's something to watch out for going forward, but with no timescales on when that will be available. So at our last social visitors event, we had the TED staff talking to us about their review and about their developments, and also about the work that we're doing with patients around EDI, so the Equality and Diversity and Inclusion Initiative. So we've got Kirsty with us this morning to give us an update on some of that work. Kirsty, over to you.
So lovely to meet you all. But the big topic across the hospital at the moment has obviously been equality, diversity and inclusion. And patients have been working, well, within Carestreams, patients have been working on coming up with some ideas in terms of putting a course together that will in the future be run through the Recovery College to give patients that don't really know much about EDI some more knowledge and learning more about it. So we're in the process of putting together this course. So what we've been doing leading up to that is co-producing some ideas. So that's obviously staff and patients getting together on Microsoft Teams. We've been meeting monthly to discuss some ideas of what we would like to include within that course, within that training. So we've been meeting with patients. They've been getting together in their groups prior to these meetings and discussing some of their ideas and what they would actually like to have in this training manual. So this has gone through all the different Carestreams. So I have an example today to show you on some of the questions that the patients have been asked and their feedback to them in terms of what they would like to see in the future with the course and what it's going to look like. So let me just share that for you. 1 second. So this is just an example from one of our Carestreams, which is the mental health Carestream. So this is a PowerPoint they've put together, feeding back the questions that have been asked in the meetings that we've been having in terms of what they want to include. So the first question that were proposed to the patients was, what would you like to see in the training? So what would you want to get out of it, in a sense? So the patients have got together in their groups and discussed the outcome of this question. They've come up with that they want to learn about culture in different countries. They want to have videos that explain that, so about different religions. They want to also include the Sitting Gills course, which is a course that we offer through the Recovery College that allows patients to receive a qualification in teaching. They want peer support. They also want to have rules in there to make it inclusive, to make sure everybody's a part of the group. They want to learn more about the 9 characteristics of the course, which if you don't know the 9 characteristics, it involves, for example, things such as age, religion, sexuality, and there's a lot more of them. I can't think off the top of my head, but I'm sure I can list them at the end. And obviously, again, making sure that it's inclusive and it involves everybody. So that was the first question that was put towards the patients, and that's their outcome. They also had some more examples for that question as well. So they wanted guest speakers, they wanted a positive thinking environment. Obviously, confidentiality is important. They thought that was a must, that it must be included. Not being judgmental. The patients also wanted a buddy system, and they wanted to learn more about EDI and how it fits in the community outside of the hospital as well, to learn more about it going forward. They also had another question. It would be, what would we need to prioritize if time is limited? So they definitely wanted a structure and time. They wanted to join topics together. So for example, race and ethnicity, they wanted to put them together. They wanted an introduction to EDI because it's a topic that people don't know a lot about. So they wanted to know generally about what EDI is and what it stands for and what it looks like out in the community as well. They wanted support with learning needs going forward and understanding, again, EDI in different cultures, and someone stepping in if somebody is not comfortable with a certain topic, that there's that ongoing support and help throughout. The other question was what should we be careful to avoid? Because obviously some of these topics can be very sensitive. So we've had to the patients have had to come up with some ideas of what they wanted to avoid throughout the training program. So obviously the rules, again, talking over people, not discriminating, accepting everybody, understanding that people have different opinions and that not everyone's going to think the same. They didn't want to see any negative media, again, avoiding being judgmental, the course being not interesting, and not considering everybody in the group. They wanted to avoid that. They felt that there should be something that everyone is included in. So another question that they also had to think about was, how long should this course be? So they came up with kind of patients in the group have already done Recovery College courses before, so there were a huge input from patients in terms of how long the sessions should be. Obviously, an hour and 30 minutes they came up with, 4 weeks per course, and they wanted to join again them topics together so that they had 3 main core courses, as you can see on there: age, disability, marriage. Civil partnership, pregnancy and maternity is 1, and then gender assignment, gender and sexual orientation is another, and religion, belief, race and ethnicity is another course. And they wanted them for over a 3-month period for all these courses. They wanted the training to when we were discussing this and sharing ideas, they obviously wanted the training to be off-ward training, but they wanted to keep it within the directorate. So meaning that mental health will discuss and work on the EDI course within mental health, and the same for women and the PD directorate and the learning disability directorate as well. So they want to keep it within their directorates. Obviously, co-producing a course, we want to make sure that everybody is included and feels comfortable with being a part of planning the training manual. So we came up with other activities that the patients can be involved in if they didn't want to plan and deliver the course. So making sure that everybody's included in this and that they're all participating in some way. So they came up with ideas such as newsletters, having rec call events, peer support, and being involved in planning resources and posters. So all the things that are in the background of making EDI more aware, well, increasing the awareness of EDI throughout the hospital. But to be honest, it's been a great effort throughout all the care streams. This is just one example from mental health, but it doesn't mean that the other care streams haven't contributed. They've all contributed fantastically, and everybody has put together ideas on how they want this training manual to look. It's still in the making. It's not finished. This is not the final outcome. We've still got a lot more co-producing to do to get the course up and running. But it's been a fantastic effort to see everybody from all the care streams putting together ideas and coming up with answers to these questions and how they want it to be, and including everybody in this as well. So I think that concludes the end of the presentation.
Thank you. That sounds like an excellent summary of what's been going on, and also it's a great indicator of what's going to happen going forward. So it's really helpful when we hear about things to hear, you know, what's happening next. And I think it would be great to come back to a future event and to keep us updated on some of the achievements that you get along the way. So now it's over to Lorna and Jane Danforth to talk to us about the Triangle of Care. We've got the Triangle of Care has been something that the hospital have been supportive of for a number of years now. And it's just, when we talked to the carers planning group, they thought it was time that we reasserted, you know, what does that mean, and gave us a chance to think about the implementation and what we might be doing next. So over to you. Oh, we've got Paul joining them as well. Great, thank you.
Brilliant, thank you, and welcome everyone. It's really good to be here. My name's Paul Sanguinazzi, and I'm Head of Involvement and Experience at the Trust, and I'm going to present this with my colleague Jane Danforth, who's our Involvement and Experience Officer. And it's kind of our role is to make sure that we listen to and work with our patients and carers across the whole of the Trust. So it's really good to be here today at Rampton as part of Carers Week. And so Carers Week, oh, actually, I've got to say something before I go on. I'm actually on call today, so I might get a call at any time. So if I just disappear, Jane's all primed to take over. So, but hopefully, you know that, don't you, Jane? But hopefully that won't happen. So, but I just thought I'd better let you know. So, okay. This week is, as I hope you're all aware, a Carers Week, and we're getting towards the end of it. But what the national theme is around making caring visible and valued. And I think over the last year, we know it's been a real challenge for carers across the country. Many have felt isolated, invisible, disconnected from those that they love and care for. And we've all seen some of the national stories of how that's played out. There's been estimated that there have been 13.6 million people caring for others during this time. And the feedback from some of those is that many have felt mentally and physically exhausted. So there is a real challenge. And as a trust, we really want to focus on making caring visible and valued, and trying to support and involve and communicate with the carers and families of those who are in our services. I was just also going to say one thing, which I picked up during this week, which someone said there are 4 kinds of people, and those are those that have been carers, those that are currently carers, those that will be carers, and those that will be cared for. And if you think about it, that probably covers just about everyone. So I think it's one of those that at some time in our life we will know and have that experience, and some of the difficulties and sometimes some of the joys that brings. So I'm going to press on. So if you could move the slides down, please, Lorna. Okay, so I thought I'd start with this because we have a trust, what's called our Trust Carers Connect network, and it's a forum for carers, for trust staff, for other organisations and local authorities to listen to and involve carers. And in that, we share ideas and good practice from across the organisation and wider. We look at what are the issues carers are facing and what can we do about that. And it's also the place where we plan and review our work around the triangle of care. So out of that, we had a trust-wide event on Monday. Jane's produced a newsletter, as she does quite regularly, and that's for our carers and staff. And we have had carers from Rampton in that group, and if people wanted to be part of that, you're obviously welcome to be part of that, because it's often very helpful to see what's happening elsewhere. And as part of this presentation, we are going to share with you some of the things that are happening elsewhere as well. So, moving on. So that we're going to focus a bit on the triangle of care and what we've been up to. And I'm hoping people are aware that the triangle of care is the triangle between patients, staff and carers. And it is all about how we work together, how we promote safety, support communication and sustain well-being. And it is part of a national scheme, and we've got 2 stars currently, which means that all our ward mental health and community mental health services have self-assessed and looked at what they do well and where they need to improve. And as a trust, we look at all of those from across the whole organisation to see what we can learn and where we need to improve. And the Carers Connect network looks at those with us, so people from that have a look at what's being done at Rampton, what's been done at Wathwood, what's been done in our child and adolescent mental health services, etc. So, next slide, please. So I'm going to go through the 6 standards. So the first standard is really about making sure that we know, if people have carers, and we've asked people if they've got carers, and we try and record some of that information. The reason we want to know that is that we can then, it makes it far easier for us to then involve people, look at how we support them and how we communicate with them. And we're looking at trying to make sure that all our electronic records are able to, we're just going through just agreed a checklist so that all our services will look at putting information on about how they involve, support and communicate with carers, so that we can see where it's working well and where it might need to improve. But there are a whole range of other things that people do in terms of that. That in some of forensic services, they use a carer contact plan, which looks at how, or work with carers to look at how they want to communicate with carers. And there are other things that some of our other services also use to do that. So next slide, please. So I'm going to hand over to Jane, because Jane is our expert on care awareness training.
Morning, everyone. I work with the involvement team across the organisation, and what we did over the last few years was to produce a face-to-face training package which was open to all of our staff. But over the life of the pandemic, we tried very hard to maintain that, and we did realise that it wasn't going to be possible to do our training in the same way. So what we do now is we produce the training for all staff using e-learning, and that's been something that we've organised with carers, unpaid carers who are connected with our services, and staff and partner organisations. So this is about everybody having the opportunity to actually go online and make sure that they take up this training. And we do want every member of staff to participate. This is about every division, which is in forensic, local and community health. So we've got a 3-year certification. So far, on Monday, there'd been 94 staff completed it since we launched it in April. And some of the pledges from our services this week are about service is trying to get as many staff as possible to actually, you know, uptake that. And we look at it 4 times a year. We evaluate it 4 times a year to make sure that we're up to date and current. We've got examples of what staff have done to include carers, plus a self-assessment sample to encourage sharing of best practice. And we will talk about a little bit about self-assessments as we move forward. The behavioural family therapy training, FIT team, family interventions therapy team, they produce training. Arnold Lodge have a local carer awareness induction, and we know that Nottingham West have pledged this Carers Week to challenge all staff in their teams to complete this training. So we've got an update on films to plan over the next year, and if anybody wants to be involved in this, yourselves included, please let us know. And I'm going to hand you back to Paul.
Thank you. So next slide, please. Okay, thank you. So the standard 3 is about having a policy and clear guidance on information sharing and confidentiality. And we know for many carers this is really, really important, and that often carers feel as though they don't receive information, they're not communicated with, and they don't have a chance to kind of share things that they know. We worked with carers and staff to try and produce a simple guide, because what we really wanted to do was to say to our staff that we think it is really, really important that you communicate with carers and don't hide behind the duty of confidentiality, which there is. So what we've tried to do in the little guide you can see there is say there are lots of things which we can share information around, and we would expect all staff to do that. And there are also things that you can do which help the sharing of information. So, for instance, seeking consent from patients or explaining to patients why it's important that we have some care involvement, as well as making sure that staff are aware there is a duty of confidentiality. And if people don't want to share types of information, personal sensitive information, then that has to be respected. But we wanted to make sure the overarching thing is that we expect staff and carers to be communicating wherever possible. If people want, we have copies of the guide. If people want to see that, we can share that. So you're more than welcome to see that. And we realise that sometimes it is quite a challenging area, and it is part of, we want to develop our conversations around this to make sure it works for both our staff and for carers. Next slide, please. One of the other things about the Triangle Care is that is to make sure that there are posts responsible for carers' families are in place. And over the last year, we've developed a kind of carer lead role, which is for each of our services, we have a carer lead. And we also have developed a network of carer links who are kind of on at ward level, team level, that support the carers agenda and know what's happening. And we have those across the whole of the trust. And I've got a little thing on the slide there about Wathwood Carers team. So they've got a lead and it shows all the different people that are involved. My understanding is it's the same at Rampton, that there are a network of people who work with and support carers across Rampton. But we're trying to evolve that to make sure that across the organisation, in every part of the organisation, there are people who are thinking about care. I'm really sorry, the unexpected has happened, Jane, and I'm gonna have to go because I've got a call. I'll try and get back as soon as possible.
Okay, Paul. Thank you. We've got. I'll just continue with what Paul was saying. And we do share the roles of carer leads and carer links with people across the organisation, so that they know what to expect. And it's important that carers know what to expect. I'm going to move on to standard 5. So if you would just click on to the next slide for me, please. That's about communicating effectively with carers, families, siblings and friends, including an introduction to the service and staff. This is really crucial that we get this right, and we don't always get it right. And it's important to acknowledge that. It's important to make sure that our carers, families, siblings and friends are updated and involved in care plans. And that should incorporate basic service information and plenty of time to speak with carers and their families, to be involved in discharge planning, and to make sure that any information about carers is actually acknowledged in the carers information file. You'll notice on some of the on the slide that Paul's included things like Skype sessions available. There's examples of the self-assessments, the care pathway, and the welcome to carers information pack. So, but these alone are not enough. It's important that to communicate it effectively, we've got to make sure that they're sent out there. At the moment, so that is mainly by email or by actually talking. We talk quite a lot at our Carers Connect network about this information. So if you do want to know more, it's really important that that you get in touch with us, and we can provide all that information after this session, because caring, it's Carers Week now. The caring is continuous. It's 24/7. And it goes on. So it's really important to make sure that we do continue with this information. So and knowing who that staff representative is to you is very important. So you've got a point of contact. Would you move on to slide 9, please? Thank you. So we've got a lot of information about support that is available, and we do a lot of this. Oh, Paul's back here. That was quick, Paul. That was very quick. I think, yeah. Well, this is my slide anyway, isn't it? So I'll continue talking about the information that is available. So I've just updated our quick guide, and that's on our IEB website, which was down this morning. I had to contact somebody this morning to get it up and running, so that we can make sure that any links are sent to you and you can look for yourselves. But I know that some people have said to us, finding information online isn't always easy. So if you can't find anything, please tell us. It's really important. So on the slide, you can see things such as a Carers Hub referral form. We ask our staff to make sure that they do provide information that is available out there in the community as well as in our organisation. And there's lots of things for individual carers that you may need, such as wellbeing and support. There's a managing changes when living with dementia group, because as we said, this is for all of our services and all staff and all our families, carers and friends. We've also got a carer support worker on one of our mental health wards on Ward B2. And in adult mental health, in our local services, we've got carer support workers, and they've put together a directory of carer support. Wathwood, we know, have a guide to carer support services, and there's information on carers assessments on the carers board at Rampton. Now, if it's important that we look at some of the best practice there and share that with all of our divisions and services. So I think it's important to, from today onwards, to look at some of those things and see what we can share. So I think, next slide, please. And this is also my slide. Staff are carers too. I'm a carer, well, I was a carer until November the 29th of last year. And I cared for my mum who had Alzheimer's for 15 years. And what we've actually got now is something called a Carer Confidence Scheme, which is run by Carers UK. And we as staff are also carers, and it shows that 1 of 3 in the NHS workforce is juggling work and care. So we're level 1 of Carer Confidence Scheme run by Carers UK as part of Employers for Carers. And if you're level 1, it means you're active in addressing carer support. There's 3 levels. Number 2 is accomplished, and that means you've become accomplished in providing carer support for staff. And number 3 is an ambassador level, which is an ambassador for carer support, both internally and externally. And for the last 2 years, since I was involved in applying for Employers for Carers recognition, it's been a journey to actually work with the organisation to make sure that it's included in our staff wellbeing section of our Connect internal intranet, and I'm pleased to say that's happened this week. And after Carers Week and beyond, we'll be doing more work to provide carer cafes for staff, as well as for we'll continue to do our Carers Connect network, and we'll also have representation from our trust at those meetings. So I think we've made some good steps forward. So next slide, please, and back to Paul.
Great, thank you so much, Jane, for filling in. Yeah, so I thought we'd just do a bit about where are we going next with this, and what we really want to do is through our training and other things is to raise awareness with all our staff that we expect them as part of their roles to be supporting, involving and communicating with carers. So some of what you've seen today are some of the things which we are doing to do that, but we want to continue to make sure that all our staff are aware of carers and families and how to involve and support and communicate with them. The Carers Connect network, which I mentioned earlier on, we want to continue to look at how we work with carers and around the triangle of care assessments and tackling issues. And the final thing we want to do is to listen better to carers and ensure we hear what carers are saying and work to support them, because we know sometimes it's not always easy for carers to get their voices heard, and that's somewhere where we want to focus and to really listen to what the experiences are of carers and what ideas carers have to improve things. So getting back to this week, this is Carers Week, and as a trust we made a pledge, which is to make caring visible. Sorry, next slide, Lorna. I was completely forgetting. Right. So yes, our trust pledge is to make caring visible and valued by working with carers to share information and stories through our website and other media. And I'll put the link to the carers section on our involvement website, which has quite a few of the blogs that we've done and a lot of information for carers. And secondly, to work with our staff so that they can get carers the information and support they need. So we're trying to make sure all our staff know where there is information and where to signpost people or give people support when they need it. So that's our pledge. And what we also asked, we asked our services to come up with some pledges. And if you can move on to the next slide, Lorna, we'll take you through some of those. If you need to keep clicking, Lorna. So the first one is our working age dementia service. So this is giving you an idea of some of the things people are doing. So they're involving carers in the development of their peer and green support hubs. Next slide. This is Rampton's slide. So that's Rampton's pledge this year, is to work alongside carers to focus on how we can improve carer communication links with staff at the hospital. So I'm sure we'll come back to that. And then next one. And this is, as James said, this was one of our teams in Nottingham West that have said that they will try and make sure all their staff do the e-learning and become more carer aware. Next slide. And this has happened this week. So one of our mental health teams did a walk and talk for carers at, I think it's pronounced Sconce Park in Newark. So that's one. Next one. And family interventions team, who are one of our teams in adult mental health, who support and carers and trained staff. They're going to put on a family work training for staff, which is a 5-day course, which really goes into depth of how to work with families and carers. So that's fantastic news. And I think there's one more. There might be one more pledge. There is. And at Bracken House, which again is in our adult mental health services, they're going to restart their evening carer support group. So those are just a flavour of some of the things that our teams are doing to support carers. And is that the end of the slides? I think it might be. Yes, I think it is. So I think that's Jane and I done with. So I'm going to hand over to Lorna, I think.
Right, okay, so I've added on to Jane and Paul's PowerPoint and their presentation, and I just want to say a massive thank you to you both, because what I wanted was for them to give bigger overview of the Triangular Care as a trust. So it isn't an initiative that is just affecting Rampton Hospital, it is affecting the whole of the trust, and the whole of the trust are working towards trying to make the integration between carers, patients and the various wards and hospitals more seamless. It's a work in progress. We're nowhere near where we should be or where we want to be, but we are taking it step by step, and hopefully we are better than where we were a few years ago. So at Rampton Hospital, we have what we would normally call our carer champions. Now, the trust has renamed this as Carer Link, so we are going to be Carer Links from now on. And this is the same role that all the other Carer Links across the whole trust have. So it's the same role at Rampton as it is at Bassetlaw or anywhere else. So there is a named person in every team. So for us at Rampton, we have 24 wards. So there's a named person on all the wards, or nearly a named person on all the wards, who is the link for care related matters. They hopefully, when we get this a bit more up and running again, because we've had a lot of changes recently, so there's a lot of staff who are now carer links that we need to train up, that they will have the more up-to-date information and support with regards to care related issues. And there are resources on the ward that will be there for them to be able to signpost their colleagues as well. So they're a font of information for their work colleagues, and that's part of that work, is so they have a little bit more information, but they will be the kind of source of contact. So really, from the point of your point of view, even though there's a named carer link, that does not mean that person is the only person you can go to. That person is just somebody with a little bit more knowledge. So the idea is you can still go to any of the ward staff members or any of the other teams with your queries. But that person is someone who's maybe just got a little bit more of awareness and is also there for the other ward staff to give them information as and when they need it. Notice boards, all the wards have a carer notice board, and that's part of their role, is to make sure that's updated. And that's part of our role, is to make sure that we send them the information to update it with as well. Okay, next slide. And by the way, Paul and Jane have been giving me credit for moving slides on. It's not me, it's the lovely Rachel from Social Work Admin that's been doing that for us today. So this is the list of our current ward carer links. Now, there are 3 gaps, I think, on there. I believe certainly Adwick, their carer link, has just left in the last 2 weeks and they haven't got a renamed person. So we are still chasing that. It's not something that is just sitting dormant. We are chasing, but ward staff, they move consistently. Wards change, things happen. So it is something that is fluid. And we regularly ask ward managers to update us with who is the carer linked for the ward. We do try and keep up with that list, and we do send posters to each ward with the named person, so it should be on those care information boards. So that's the list. What I can do is put it somewhere so people know. I'm not sure yet where yet. Maybe you can think about that in the discussion groups. Next slide, please, Rachel. So we've talked about every ward at Rampton Hospital, every ward across the trust have to complete what we call the Triangular Care Self-Assessment Plan. And this is to enable us as a trust to work with the carers trust and to gain our membership status for the Triangular Care. Rampton has been doing this for a few years now. This last year, we've changed it slightly due to the pandemic, due to the added pressure on the wards, that it wasn't by every ward, it was done by directorate. So we still had an overview for every directorate, just not for every ward. The one I'm showing you here is the one for Grampian ward, because they are almost standalone, because they are the death service. I thought I would just showcase this one. So it is the completed assessment. I have made no alterations to it. So next slide, please, Rachel. It is slightly dry. I do apologise. They aren't exciting. They don't have any gimmicks. I can't make them fly in and do whatever like I would normally do on my PowerPoints. But basically, the Triangular Care Assessment takes you through those 6 standards that Jane and Paul talked about, and it breaks it down. So, for example, standard 1, you've got identify carers, families and siblings, and then it breaks it down into the expectations. The first contact, what happens, and then what each ward does is to provide the evidence of that. So social care work records, the RIO reports, referral assessments, the CESA documentation. These are all the hospital sort of recording systems, telephone contact documentation. Patients are asked who they would like to be added onto their contact lists. And you put in, or the staff will put in sort of sometimes the odd bit of evidence to back that up. So on here they put on the application for telephone contact, and further down they've got the Rampton Carers Pack as the evidence of sort of an induction-y type thing or carer related information. So they are quite dry forms. Staff, ward managers, modern matrons do input on them. I do periodically email out to carers who have ticked the box on our database for carer consultation information if they want to add into this document. But what I don't do is send out the document as it is, because it's too, you know, it's wordy, it's confusing. What I tend to do is break it down into separate questions, which I ask, and then the replies I get I would forward on to the relevant parties. For Grampian ward in this situation, I didn't get anybody from Grampian or attached to Grampian ward reply, so there was no carer input on this particular assessment, but some of the other assessments across the board will have had some. Next slide, please. So I'm not going to talk it through properly because it's going to take me an age. But things like the care and confidentiality guide that Paul and Jane had flagged up earlier, all the wards have received that. It may be worth us resending it out, to be fair, so we can do that. IG training is mandatory for all staff across the trust, so that includes elements of confidentiality. And the information is those confidentiality cards are certainly being sent to the wards to go onto the carer notice boards and on the ward notice boards. What we need to do is to make sure that they are up there. Now, Grampian are saying that it's on their board, so it's there in place. Next slide, please. Oh, we moved on. Oh, sorry, I'm looking at Rachel and she's moved it on without me knowing. So to find posts at Rampton Hospital, we're actually quite fortunate because we do have the carers champions who have been in post for a few years. Some of them, you have the family and volunteer support team, us. We are defined posts in relating to carer issues, and we're quite fortunate because a lot of other places don't have that kind of dedicated team as that is their job role. A lot of other places will have persons who are the carers links who are doing it on top of the role that they are currently doing, and you know, all power to them. It's a big role to be fulfilling on top of what is their day-to-day job. And at Rampton, every patient is allocated a social worker, and the social worker in this situation tends to be the main carer link to the families. Next slide, please. So we are now on to number 5. So information and leaflets, and we're going to come back to standard 5 within our discussion groups because that is the focus around carer communication, and that's what we want to focus our discussion groups on. So for us at Rampton, we have the information pack that you should have all received. As part of that, we also have the films, the rough guide films on the Trust website, which mirror the carer information pack, and it's broken down into the same sections that are in the carer information pack. So it's bite-sized chunks of information that you can look at your own leisure. And those films come to about 45 minutes worth of information, but it also means it's in a different accessible format as it's all subtitled and there also for people who are maybe struggling with hearing. Most wards, some wards, not all, some wards have a ward leaflet. Now Grampian does have a ward leaflet that they will give out to family members, which is great. Last slide, or next slide, please. So as you can see, the assessment, it's a very dry document. It is about just evidencing what's there, but what it does, it's a trigger for ward managers and for the carer links to go through what does happen on the ward and to see where the gaps are, to see what they need to develop, see what they need to do. So, for example, the carer awareness training, which Jane was just talking about, that email has gone out to all our carer champions and all our ward managers, modern matrons, to Anna, requesting that staff get the time to complete that ward carer training, or that carer awareness training. So what we need to do, Jane, is to keep tabs on numbers when that comes to it. So that is an assessment. It is dry, it's not exciting, but what it does is just document what we are doing and what we're not doing. And the idea of it is, if we were green on everything, that would actually be worrying, because it means that we think we're doing really well. And the idea of it is to highlight the areas where we need to grow and where we need to develop. So that is our last slide on there. And I apologise, it is a bit death by PowerPoint today on this. What Rachel's going to do is just put up the questions for our discussion group. So our questions are based on that standard 5. And what we want you to think of together is what do we do currently with regards to carer communication? What works well? What doesn't work so well? What can you think of? What ideas and thoughts can you generate that we haven't thought of, that we can then explore to move it forward and to make it better? So what supports can the hospital put in place to aid communication and to support you in your caring role? So our discussion groups are coming up. We have the magic of technology in this day and age. MS Teams has grown and we can actually allocate you into groups. So rather than giving you separate links into groups, Rachel is going to allocate you all into a discussion group. We've got 2 discussion groups. One's going to be led by Lynn, one's going to be led by Jane Danforth, and then we'll come back and feed back to the main group our ideas afterwards. So from our group, we never got as far as question 2. We only managed question 1, and there was some significant issues that carers had and experiences that they had that were quite negative with regards to communication. I think particularly in the light of the pandemic as well. Some felt that the communication isn't regular, that it's more sporadic, that it is generally based around the carers kind of linking in with particular people and that kind of building up of a relationship. So if they felt that they've spent time and quality of time building a relationship up with, particularly with the social worker, that they tend to have more information back. The difficulty of that is one carer stated that in 3 years he's had 4 social workers, so he's had to invest time 4 times in order to build those relationships up. And sometimes having those changes of staff and named staff for a patient can be difficult from a caring perspective. Generic information, generally, my understanding was that was okay from the hospital, the generic information, but it's around the information around patient care. Jane, I don't know if you want to add into that.
I think that it was clear that there was a consensus that there was that inconsistency and continuity of information. That was something that people seemed to universally feel that was the case. And then forming really good relationships with people, it's important that when those end, to make sure that there's something else in place. I mean, we've got solutions as well, you know, what works well and what could be improved, but we'll come back to that.
So there was also issues around contact with other members of the clinical team. So it is mainly the social worker that people would have contact with, but they would like contact with the other members as well, particularly from that kind of more medical situation. We had an issue about inconsistency of communication with regards to emergency care for a patient. Which was incredibly upsetting for the carer, and understandably so, where one day they were getting some information, the next day the staff member that they were dealing with didn't feel comfortable in giving them the information that they needed and wanted, even though they have consent to have that information. So confidentiality had been explored. What that carer did state is that the social worker is never allowed to leave the hospital. They have to stay here forever. But it was around that kind of information from other members of the team as well. It was incredibly upsetting for them. It was highlighted that the carer champions on the ward, it has been difficult to get named carer champions latterly. And I did say that it has been an initiative that has kind of dropped off the radar a little bit at Rampton Hospital, mainly due to the pandemic and the fact that a lot of the staff resources have been elsewhere. Jane? Yeah,
I think it was also mentioned that people would love a weekly update from someone on the ward who actually knows their son or daughter. And we don't only want to know when things are bad, we want to know when things are going well too, because it's been a huge worry during the pandemic, and it's been, you know, exacerbated by that.
And I think the other thing that came across was sometimes there's a lack of information with regards to the policies and procedures. So things like what you can and can't take into the hospital, again, that's altered over the pandemic because there's been added security and what do you call it, infection issues. Yeah, infection control issues. But maybe there needs to be something on the Trust website or something that actually has a clear list of what carers can have, patients can have. Now, there is something, I think, somewhere on the website already, thinking off the top of my head, but I need to just double check that and find out where it is. We didn't really get to question 2. We kind of explained some things.
There were some things, and it was really about, I mean, Anna mentioned the new policy around things coming into the hospital. It's a central area where things are logged, and making sure that things are going to go out and they don't get lost. And it's something that needs to be monitored over time. So that's something to chase up, because it's a new policy.
We ran out of time, essentially, didn't we? We talked for another half an hour or so.
Thank you. Okay, so I'll do some feedback from our group then. Some themes were repeated from what you've picked up in your group. The big positive was that the communication with the family and volunteer support team works well. And it was reiterated that they're happy to talk to families at any point. People weren't so sure about the carer link, and when we went on to talk about that more, we decided that actually perhaps we need a link carer to help with the triangle of care assessments as well as a carer link. So that, because what we're not getting is the carer's perspective. So if we read the ward's triangle of care assessment, would that actually meet with the carer's experience of what's going on? So I think that's something that we can work on. We talked a little bit about CPAs. Currently, families aren't able to attend CPAs. That's a bit of a frustration for people. And then how they get that feedback. They can hear from their relative, but they would value a professional resume of that feedback. And also about sometimes when we ask patients who they want to attend, maybe they're not well enough to identify that they would like family to attend. So that could do with following up rather than just being left as they don't want anyone attending. And following on from that clinical stuff, there was issues about communication with the responsible clinicians picked up in our group as well. I would say that we had started some work on that, and we have got responsible clinician that's identified to work with us going forward, and will be working with us on the points that are raised today. And we're perhaps planning to do some follow-up to that with in December, if I think that would be a reasonable time scale for us to do some follow-up. We also talked about language and about how we communicate with people for whom English may not be their first language. And we thought that we probably could do more to engage with those people and think about how we send out information, and to perhaps distinguish between clinical support. So we might get a social worker arranging for an interpreter to talk to families, but maybe we could also do that from a support side for the family and volunteer support team, to get an interpreter to talk about the support needs, which may identify what people need to support them to visit, or to visit virtually, or to come to our carer events, because we're acknowledging that since we've moved to virtual events, the diversity of our group has become poorer, really. We talked a bit about translation options being improved with technology, and how we need to really sort of get round how we use those better. And from a TED point of view, they were asking what do carers want to hear about, and from a carer's point of view, they want to hear about everything. And I think that was reflected in some of Jane and Lorna's feedback, which is they want to hear about the good as well as when there's a problem. So we also picked up on the log of issues, and I think we need to think about how we do that. And I wonder, sort of going forward, whether we need to have perhaps a little task and finish group working the feedback from today into a little action plan, or quality improvement plan, that we can work on, and have carers working with us to look at some of the issues we've identified, and to say what is the best way to take these forward. So can people sort of give me a thumbs up if they think that would be helpful, to have a small group working on taking this forward? Anna's saying it's a grand plan. Can I see thumbs up generally? And then we can look at how we incorporate this log, and how we pick up some of these issues and take them forward, because I think what I think there's a danger of, that things become talked about, but then we lose them after today. And we're trying to work on things and then take them forward and feedback, so that we tell people what we've done when we've heard people's concerns. So I've had lots of thumbs up. So I think if people are interested on working on that with us, I can see that Dawn's said count me in, but if anyone else is able to work with us, if you let Lorna know. Paige has said her as well, and then we'll arrange some virtual meetings to take these issues forward. So I want to start to bring the event to a close, and say thank you to our guest speakers, Paul and Jane, and of course to Lorna for her work. Thanks, Anna, for your introduction and for joining us today. It's always really nice to have senior managers supporting the carers agenda and being with us. Thanks to all the other staff who've given up the Saturday mornings in the sun. But most of all, thank you to the carers. And I think you need to be kind to yourself this weekend, because you do an amazing job. It's not easy being a carer for any of us. And the patient's journey would be so much poorer and more difficult without your support. So I want to say a big thank you on their behalf, and to say be kind to yourself. We would normally pamper you this weekend, wouldn't we? It's on our normal pampering weekend. There'd be lots of lovely things. Sorry, you've got to make your own lunch as well. But hopefully, we will be all together back soon when this dreadful virus goes away, and it's safe for us to do that. In the meantime, happy Carers Week. Thank you, and we'll see you all soon. Thank you.